Tell me when you're ready, we'll call to order.
What's your seat?
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Mr. Mayor, how are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Good.
Okay, yep, we're ready.
All good? All right. All right, thank you, everybody. I'd like to call to order the February 6th, 2023 meeting of the Oregon City Council Economic Development Committee. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:03 PM. I'm Steve Horniak. I'm the chairman of the committee. I'll be leading today's meeting. Other members from the committee that are here with me are committee members Tim Zale, councilman of City of Oregon, and committee member Marvin Dabish, councilman from the City of Oregon. Pleased to see that we have all council members here, as well as our administration, our mayor. So we appreciate everybody coming out. For those in the audience that haven't been to one of these or seen one of these, there is a sign-in sheet up at the podium. Not absolutely required, but we do ask that we do have people sign in just so we know who is here, since it is part of a public meeting. So there is an opportunity to sheet up on that podium. We'd ask you to sign in at some point in time before we exit or finish the meeting today. Okay. So kicking off with our meeting this evening, we do have an agenda in mind. I just wanted to kind of start out with a couple of things, and then we're going to start off leading in with Fairmont Properties and bring them in here to talk to us a little bit and give us a presentation and update. So a couple of years ago, we started, and I'll say many years ago, we started the discussion in Oregon about trying to develop a town center, right? A nucleus to the community that would give the community something not only to utilize, quality of services in our area, number of choices as far as restaurants, shops, and other things, as well as entertainment opportunities with that. Obviously, we've had an unprecedented wrinkle over the last couple of years that I think we're all getting used to and working through. And it's given us a lot of time to really think about and talk about what we want this to be. As anybody who's driven by has seen, we've done a lot of work on infrastructure and layout to the design of town center, going through from Navarre Avenue and moving southward from there. And what we really wanted to do tonight was, first of all, create an opportunity for Fairmont to come in and really give us an update on the vision and the idea of what's going with that, and then just have some open dialogue and a little Q&A session tonight as well, so that we could, again, bring this project forward and start making some things really start happening to really kind of develop and enhance our community. So with that said, I'll introduce or bring up our two individuals from Fairmont. I'll let you guys introduce yourself as you go. They do have a presentation that will be up on the screens in the front and the back of the room. And with that, gentlemen, we'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you. My name is Bryce Hamill. I'm the Vice President of Design and Construction for Fairmont Properties. I'm joined here today with Jeff Steck, our Vice President of Finance. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to be here today. I think the lead-in was fantastic, and we know that this is a process that has taken some time to get off to this point, but we're excited about where we've come and where we are. We're excited about the progress we've made in the recent past. And we're excited to sort of talk a little bit about our company and where we are with the project. I will run through pretty quickly just a little bit of background on Fairmont Properties. We're a 25-year-old company. We've done a little north of $2 billion worth of development, much of it very similar to what you're looking to accomplish here in Oregon. We've built multiple town centers that have become the downtowns for their communities. We'll share a couple of projects, but we've done projects that were $700 million in the Flats East Bank to projects that were far less than that, and created really real community in smaller towns. This is what we do. This is what we're excited about. We don't have a prototype. Fairmont Property is not a company that sort of comes in and administers its will or takes what we've done in the past and says, let's replicate this. We don't have prototypes. It's really about coming into a community, understanding what that community wants and how we can best serve that community. This is no different. And I know that, deal fatigue can be real. And I think it was a good lead in. These projects take time to get off to the right place, and they take time and iteration to find the right solution. And I think what we're excited about most today is that we really feel like where we've come from in the last few years, we're at a place that really feels like it's right now. We're also at a place in time that it feels like it's the right time to start to develop. The last few years have been challenging. Right now is challenging from a finance standpoint. But we believe that we've hit this market at the right time to be able to work through design, work through leasing, get ourselves prepared to break ground. And at the time that we're going to break ground, we're going to see some relief in this market from what we've seen in the past year. And that's going to be fantastic. One of the things that we will benefit from in that circumstance is that we had projects that broke ground right before this market shifted, and there were high labor increases, high material increases, and those were things that we had to adjust to throughout the process. We're going into this knowing that now. We're going into that knowing what we need to spend to create the type of environment that you want as a community, and that we want to attract the type of tenants that are going to create a real town center.
Yeah, I did not see the presentation, no.
Who's controlling the presentation for him?
Yeah. I need to have it. Yeah.
Just a marker and a dry erase board, and I'm good to go.
We may need to go old school here. Let's see. Are we close enough
This
to?
has to be switched over.
To the HDMI has to be switched?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I can't control.
Trying to remember where it's at.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Reeves.
would this be time to, try to ask a few questions if we could? Or should we wait till after the presentation?
I prefer if we waited till after a presentation, just so we can see what points they touch on and come back to questions. As we're doing this, Bryce, just in the effort of time, maybe I'm assuming you can walk through this probably off the top of your head, maybe from the company history and, just a little bit about you guys, where you're at, where you've been so far with the project. And then hopefully we'll have IT figured out by the time we're ready to kind of kick off from there.
Absolutely. So I mentioned a little bit about Fairmont Properties, 25-year-old company, a little over $2 billion worth of mixed-use development, north of 30 projects. Almost all of our projects exist within the context of a public-private partnership, so very similar to what we're talking about here. Switch one. We are a fully integrated real estate development company. That means that we have everything from design and construction management to finance to leasing to operations to in-house legal to project management. One of the benefits of Fairmont Properties is that we don't leave a project when we're done with it. One of the things that we're really known for is creating that programming that once you open a project, sustains the project. We can all do the most beautiful development in the world, but if you don't announce it and keep announcing it until it becomes a household name, you're not putting it in the right position. We also take our relationships with our tenants very seriously. I overheard a gentleman behind me ask a question about sort of the local, and I thought it was a great question, and I'm going to try to answer it before we begin, is that one of the things Fairmont Properties prides itself on is creating a great mix of local, regional, and national tenants. And that's from a development perspective. It brings that community from the local side. It brings the notoriety of the national brands. And when you start to mix and mingle those, something great starts to happen, and you get the small mom and pop shops, you get the guys that have maybe AAA credit, which do help in the development process, particularly my colleague in the finance side. But it also allows us to create a really eclectic architecture. And as an architect, one of the reasons I came to Fairmont Properties is that we care about architecture and we care about environment more than most developers. And we won't go into a ton of our background on our projects here, but I invite you all to sort of take a look at our website. We think it speaks for itself in terms of the care and quality we place in the creation of space. We also enjoy the social engineering aspect of it, and that's where some of the programming comes in. That's where some of creating the right leasing tenant mix comes in. First and Main is one of our marquee projects. It is essentially a downtown for a small community. This happened a little bit before my time at Fairmont Properties. I've been there almost 11 years. But this project has really become the nexus or the center of First and Main. It also is a testament to when a community comes to us and they say, this is what we really want. In this circumstance, they really wanted a grocer and they wanted something that was a little bit more boutique. And so we worked with a local grocer, Heinen's, and we created a small format grocer for First and Main. It's the only one of its kind. It's been wildly successful and has never had to grow. And essentially, it was really helping them learn how to pare down what their offering was to be able to squeeze the same sort of value out of a much smaller space. The reason we wanted a smaller grocer is because we needed the rest of the space to start to create more activity, more dynamic tenants, things that were going to be day and nighttime uses. And so in this circumstance in First and Main, it's a two-story development. We've certainly done 32-story high rises, but this one holds a special place in our heart because it really brings that vernacular to the community. And then our next project that we're going to highlight here is our most recent project, Pinecrest. This is, it's a little larger than what we're talking about here. It's 150,000 square feet of office. It's a Marriott AC hotel. It's about 400,000 square feet of retail and a little under 100 residential units in a movie theater. This project is unique because it starts to, Orange Village, extremely small area, no downtown. Again, this is a massive project, but it brought a downtown to a community. And so when we start to talk about the relevant experience of creating a town center, First and Main, very different, but created a town center. Pinecrest, very different, created a town center. In all of those instances, those were successful because of the relationship we had with the municipality, because of the voice we heard from the community, and because we're not prototypers. We're not going to be successful unless this project is successful. And that takes us being able to realize we're not the expert on Oregon. You guys are. And so it's really about listening and then delivering the right tenant mix that's going to fulfill the needs of the community. This project, obviously, it has a phenomenal balance of local, regional, and national tenants. One of the successes of this project really is what happened to Pinecrest post-COVID. And I think part of what we always talk about in looking at what year are we in this project is why. And part of this is we built this project. I should take one step back. We built this project when we were going to national conventions and people told us retail was dead. And we were like building 400,000 square feet of retail going, okay, we think we know something that the world doesn't know, but maybe we don't. And it became a wild success pre-COVID, and it became even more of a success post-COVID. And part of that is what I think we've reached at Oregon Town Center is we've had time. And right now is the right time. And right now is the time that we sort of realize what that mix needs to be vibrant. Post-COVID, we saw so many different unique tenants come to Pinecrest and reach out to us as opposed to our leasing team trying to attract new tenants or different tenants, because they wanted to center around something like this. And that is what sort of our new idea for Oregon Town Center is. And we think that we've brought some life that we've learned from First and Main, some life that we've learned from Pinecrest, some life that we've learned from the Flats East Bank, from our college town projects, and really sort of centered that around what this new iteration, which we would like to call sort of our final master plan that we will take to market will be. So today we will we'll review the master plan. We'll take a look at some inspiration imagery and talk about why we pulled that imagery. We'll look at some milestones that we're going to accomplish yet in 2023, in 2024, and our opening in 2025. Then we'll take a look at the merchandising plan to sort of give you an idea of how we're going to create that activation and that animation that's going to bring a sense of place. So essentially what we're looking at here, and I apologize if I turn my back on council, what we're looking at here is not too indifferent a scenario from what you saw at Pinecrest, where there's a double-sided streetscape. The difference being that at Pinecrest, there's a two-lane street flanked by parking on either side. That works because Pinecrest had 4 stories over podium on one side, single story on the other side, and there was a closeness and a proximity that allowed that distance to still function well. What we're envisioning here is essentially this through street being, for all intents and purposes, pedestrian only. So, and I will say that I know sometimes 2 rows of parking looks like a lot in plan, but if you start to think about what 2 rows of parking feels like when you've bermed the sides, it's really not that much. But really looking at how do we create a walkable environment that attaches or connects itself to the project to the south, and creates a dynamic environment where there's cross-pollination between all of these different tenants. What we envision here is creating an area where we can shut down this street, obviously for pedestrian only, throughout all this area. For events, we picture festoon lighting, patioed environments, that people will park here, they'll enter the retail establishments, but essentially the life and the heart of the project exists within the interior. That starts to disassociate the public from the car and starts to feel a little bit more urban without an urban nature project. We've also included some gracious green space here. I will say that at Pinecrest, we have about 8,500 square foot green space. This is about double that. But in all of our projects, we have green space. We pull all the utilities to be able to have bands, concerts, all of that. So, these are areas where we believe we need to do heavy programming. That is part of our mantra and part of how we sustain our retail tenants is to create demand drivers that then hopefully those people go and buy something from our tenants. I think as you can see here, part of what we are doing is creating an arrival sequence off of Navarre. From a development perspective, some of the things that this plan is doing really well is it's keeping the visibility of all of these tenant storefronts from multiple points. Visibility is huge for all tenants. In many instances, tenants don't even like trees. We love trees. They think the leaves get in the way of their signage. We actually think that people, in this instance, they will park their car, they'll get inside the tree line. We'll write design and sign criteria that starts to add those sort of placemaking elements. The way that we envision this is that, on these perimeter sides, there'll be street-facing signage, and on the interior and the patio environment, there'll be a blade sign. It starts to sort of break down with smaller instances of relatable scale. I think you can sort of see over here a crude 3D model of what this would look like that starts to create the essence of space. You'll start to see why we think alleviating parking on either side of what this would be. And in full disclosure, if for some reason we open this project and there's a bottleneck right here and there needs to be some times during the day or different seasons that this can be open to traffic to be able to unjam that, then that's what will happen. But in general, what you're looking at here, the blue is the buildings themselves. These gray areas around are the patios. So you can start to see what we're doing here is that we're creating a small patio environment facing the parking, large enough for a two-top table, something sandwich, a sandwich sign, two-top table, something that says, hey, there's something here, there's people here, but that we're going to push the activity within the heart. The patios flanking the green are 15 feet. That's large enough for 2 to 3 four-top tables. And then the patios on the interior here are 10 feet. That's large enough for 2 four-top tables. Not every one of these tenants is going to be a restaurant with a patio. Some of them are going to be grab and go. Some of them are going to be soft goods retail, service retail, but we're going to mix and mingle those tenants throughout. The key to a master plan at this stage is flexibility. So what we want to do is we want to define a couple of guiding principles that allow us to take this to market without deviating greatly as we start to lease this up. There's going to be a tenant that comes to us that says, we'd like deeper space. We love that tenant. We'd like to say yes. There's going to be a tenant that says, we don't need space that deep. We love that tenant. We'd like to say yes. Some of these, what you're seeing here is a pretty standard grid of 30 feet. That would be the divider lines here to give some scale to this. We believe that in this instance, it's going to be important to break up the mass of the building. So you've seen a couple of pad buildings that are a little smaller, a couple of longer runs. The vision for this is essentially this area down here, and you'll see in the merchandising plan is where we intend to put a hotel. So you'll have some hospitality use here. We'll then garner some of the retail across the street to support that and meander your way up. The total ground floor square footage, including the hotel right now, is around 76,000 square feet. I should say in this, because the parking stall count 516, one of the things that we always do is shared parking. The worst thing you can do is overpark because nobody likes to see parking stalls. We use a complex model that sort of measures the type of user that we have, the amount of time they typically spend, whether it's a sit-down restaurant, a grab-and-go, a retail service, a service provider. that measures the time of day, the season, and how many maximum stalls do we need so that we can get more than a 4-hour life cycle out of each stall. We try to get 3 of those so that we can keep 7 per thousand instead of 17 per thousand. So in terms of some of the inspiration that we pulled, what we envision here, because inherently in overnight development, you're going to lose a little bit of that authenticity. What we'd like to do in this instance, because it's single story and it's an overnight development, is take some cues from a more historic style of architecture in terms of the detailing, but then challenge ourselves to do it in a contemporary way. With respect to the geography, we like to pick darker tones because they look good during the winter too. But what we'd like to do is take each of these individual buildings and make it its own thing. So it becomes a collection. It's not that we won't have neutral piers, but one of the things we'll also do is within those neutral piers is we will challenge our tenants and ask our tenants to be creative, to create an identity, something that peppers the streetscape with something unique, not just storefront. One of the things we've tried to do in the past is to design 3 or 4 of these. And for more local tenants that may not have the history of design and architecture and cost estimating, we can provide them something that is within what the money we will give them to build their store out would achieve, while still achieving what we want from a design and aesthetic standpoint. One of the other things, and this is sort of is that the green space, because it measures about 17,000 square feet in total, what we'd like to do is create areas within that may not be up all the time, that can pop down if there's programming or events, but something that we can put in those spaces to at least draw some cohesion between the 2 sides that flank the green space so that there's not an empty. Grass is not always the best gathering space. It doesn't work well with a lot of shoes or weather. Hardscape traditionally and historically is how people gather. What we'd like to do is take the public space, the green space, and start to create more of a life cycle that can occur there. Maybe this is a pop-up. Maybe this is where some local people can get a start. Test the waters of like, will my product work? How will it work? How do I have to market it? How do I decorate that space? We also want to make sure that we're not just doing single-story buildings that are, traditional flat facades. We think that there's an element here in something like this that is a more historic element, but that can certainly be done in a more contemporary manner to bring some dimension. So when you see the 3D model and it's sort of a flat, extrusion, just know that the architecture is coming. And we view things like this as great ways to create depth and interest while also hiding RTUs and things like that. We also don't do traditional small-scale retail. So when I say that, I mean we don't do 10-foot floor-to-floors. We're going to do, 18 to 24 feet. And when you do that, you create the opportunity that even though you don't have a second-story space, you can design it such that it is. And that gives sort of a little bit of presence and a little bit of mass. And that way we can move some of these buildings up and down. It's not just one static line. And then obviously, as we start to look at what the pedestrian feel will be, we want to do an enhanced paver down the pedestrian walk. We want to do things that bring texture and scale and pattern and detail to the environment. Here you see a great example of how that blade sign can work and just create a little bit of interest. But also to look at some areas where we might introduce more contemporary style. And that way it starts to feel a little bit more organic. It starts to feel like this became something over time. Maybe it feels like it was second generation space and it got a facelift. And then just some more imagery in terms of how we might break down some of that scale and do a collection of buildings as opposed to one static, more of a strip mall vernacular. Here's where I need my whiteboard.
Sorry about that. Apologize for the technical difficulties here.
I guess we can pause and take some questions now on just sort of the master planning. I think the things that we'll touch on next are some milestones in terms of timing, things that we're going to accomplish, and then we'll take a look at some proposed merchandising just from a zoning perspective.
All right, we'll go ahead and kick it off there. If anybody has any questions thus far through the presentation? I have one to start out with, for you, Bryce, if you would. When you pulled up the master plan, using that center corridor as a walking corridor as opposed to a driving corridor, understanding that, you know, this is box one of the town center development, there are additional boxes to the south. How have you planned or thought through traffic flow that would come through box one of the town center master plan you presented today into boxes 2 and 3 eventually? How do you see that taking place with that center road being closed?
So we worked with sort of the city to look at a couple of options. One is that Street F is a new street. That's a street to the east, and that connects directly to the street to the south that will sort of go through the residential development down there. So there'll be a direct connection there with a couple of inroads into the property. I think also from a just sort of an adjacency or a walking perspective, you know, it seems like it might be a long way, but from this inlet here to here, you know, you're looking at, you know, 150 feet to 200 feet, half a city block. So the connectivity just from a visual standpoint is there. I think if we looked at something that would bend this way, we start to lose a lot of the efficiencies in terms of parking, and we create a leasing issue in terms of arranging the right tenants in the right place. But I think one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, this center spine is 24 feet wide. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a study, because there was some concern, and initially in one of the previous iterations, we showed that this was going to be a through street with parking on either side. I still think that we're going to need to test out in the beginning, you know, is most of the traffic going to come off of Navarre and have a decision point that's too soon, that it creates a bottleneck? Do we need to leave this road open to start to at least funnel some traffic down and unclog this area? Until what I believe what will happen is that there'll be a learned response, and that this will not be the primary entrance, but these will become the primary entrances. And at that point, you're circulating the parking lot as opposed to this center spine. I think there'll be a balance of when that street needs to be open, but I think it's going to be a learned balance. There'll be times of days, the time of day or season that it works out that way. Otherwise, I think what we'd like to do, and it was, you know, it was a deep conversation. I hung on to my I think it needs to be a street for quite some time, until really taking this into 3D and starting to think about what the experience wants to be. And with the 2 single-story sides, it felt too disjointed, like there was too much space there. But I think it'll be a process to understand exactly what that street wants to be. The goal being, no matter what, it's pavered, it's pedestrian, the scale drops down in terms of materiality.
Okay. So as you say, this is going to be kind of a study as we go. So if the original design development is for a walking corridor through that center access and that 24 feet, 2 questions on that. One is, what's the feasibility of turning that into a driving lane down the road? The second would be, so in the pads, which I believe would be C through H on this, are the merchants going to have access, presentable access from both sides of that building? If that's a walking in the middle and a parking on the outside, do they have to have dual entrance facilities that can work?
So that's a great question. It's one of the things we put a lot of thought into, just with respect to where does the front door and where does the back door be? And that was one of my initial thoughts with why this should be a primary street, always a street, always with parking, in terms of being able to drop somebody off right at a front door. It did raise the question of where is the front door and where is the back door. We've actually done developments in the past that have had this. They've been successful, but there've also been challenges dependent on the retailer itself. What we believe is probably the best here is that, you will have your front entrance here. And then some tenants, obviously if they don't have a patio and they don't have a public component to their establishment, we'll probably not have anything in the rear. But that doesn't mean that we can't function that space or utilize that to enhance the neighbor's patio, or do something in terms of, graphics, artwork, things like that. But that's where sort of getting out ahead in some of the leasing process and understanding where these tenants are going to fall and how they're going to affect their neighbors. And with respect to this merchandising plan, you can start to see a little bit, the yellow is fast casual food and beverage. The darker blue is full service, some soft goods, service retail, and then the hospitality component. The goal here is to pepper all. Obviously, we're centering a lot of that organization around the center court here, with the anticipation of trying to create as much of a magnitude of gathering as possible here. But we still want people to come here and kind of do this, and that's going to be part of the leasing process. But certainly, through design guidelines, through strategic leasing, we believe we're going to overcome any sort of front door, back door.
Okay. Last question I have, and then I'll open it up if anybody else has any. So the merchants that are here are going to be food and beverage people, retail, service. They're going to need deliveries. How are they going to receive deliveries with this layout plan?
So that's also part of retail development is a very reactive one. And so we kind of have to get started. And, traditionally, most of our developments are all serviced from the interior. This organization presents a little bit of a challenge for that. But it also doesn't mean that we can't, if tenant A needs to be an L, right here, we're left with a little bit of space here, then that's where we're gonna hide in, some service. We've done this in the past. We built a medical office building down in Northern Kentucky for St. Elizabeth, and the service area was very prominent to the street, and they were hyper concerned with sort of the dynamic of that. And so we designed the service area so that it basically blended in with the garage or with the building itself. When the gate was down, it was just part of the metal panel of the facility. And I think that's part of what we would do here. I will say there's also a possibility, and we would do this through integrated architecture, that something might land out here if all of this becomes leased perfectly into 100%. That we might be able to store a compactor in that is accessed, throughout the day.
Okay, very good. I'll open it up. Anybody else, members of the committee, others from City Council or the administration? Mr. Reeds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several different things. What are the numbers of parking spots that are available or going to be available? Plus, like, where would the handicap parking be? And the third part is, where's the trash going to be located?
So we talked a little bit about the trash just before, and essentially what we would do is, as we start to lease this project, we would find where the holes are, and where the holes become, that's where we would infill with any sort of internally, stored trash areas. So, for instance, if this tenant became L and they wanted their patio out the back, and there was a small area out front here that was left over, we would infill that area with service or an operations or a management office. What we don't want to do is present where service and operations will be day one. We want our tenants to lead that process, and that way we attract the best tenants by giving them the most flexibility to take the space they want. And we'll figure out the rest as we sort of go along. That was where I also touched on, if we need to put like an area out here, a trash enclosure, what we would do in this instance is that we would make it blend with the architecture of the development. It would not be like a mesh fence with a dumpster on the inside. It would be a brick facility with a nice gate to it, and a roof.
There would be several of those throughout the complex?
It kind of all depends. Ideally, if we're left with enough to do it on the interior of the space, that's going to be the best. Obviously we've got 517 surface stalls here, and we have 76,000 square feet of uses. That's about 7 per thousand, a little over 7 per thousand in terms of parking. What we've seen from previous leasing is that people are pushing more towards the 10, 12, 15 per thousand request. That is not the best for a mixed-use environment or a dynamic environment like this. We want less parking, we want more uses, and we want, more time used by each stall. I apologize. What were your?
Well, I asked about the number of parking spots and
And
the
handicap.
handicap parking
Yeah.
and plus the trash is what.
So handicap stalls will also be, as we start to do our leasing process, we identify where the front doors will be. Those will be peppered in per code to make sure that we've got enough and they're located in the right stalls.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to reserve mine to the end because he may answer some of my questions and there's no sense of having him answer them when it's part of his presentation.
Fair enough. All good? Think we can proceed.
So some milestones, and what we've essentially done is we've broken this down into what's going to occur in 2023, what's going to occur in 2024, and what's going to occur in 2025. Right now, we have great momentum. We have a lot of back and forth and a lot of dialogue between ourselves and the city in the creation of this version of the master plan. That gives us the ability to do a full construction cost estimate, to really take a look at where that places us from a financing perspective, and to put this master plan out on the street to see whether our expectations are met in terms of rent rates. But as we start to do all of that, and all of this will happen sort of simultaneously, is that we will finalize, or we'll finalize our negotiation, our development agreement with the City of Oregon. We'll finalize the project master plan and achieve formal site plan approval. We will advance the design documentation and project cost estimating. That means the retainment of an architect, of civil engineers, of MEP engineers. The thing we always like to say is that development is a big risk business. We actually don't make a dollar until we break ground. So everything we do up to the point of groundbreaking is at risk. But that's why we're motivated as much as anybody to get to a groundbreaking and to open this project. We want to finalize the core tenant interest. What I mean by that is that my colleague Jeff is hyper-focused on meeting a leasing threshold for financing. Currently, obviously, the lending market is a little bit difficult, but with the right tenants with credit, and the right amount of tenants, what needs to happen is to overcome the debt service ratio. That doesn't take 100% leased. We don't plan to open this 100% leased. That would be fantastic, but it has never happened. But we plan to open this very well leased. And if you've seen any of our prior projects, storefronts that are still available are covered with artwork. They're not left vacant. They're not left dark. And in some instances, they're utilized as pop-up areas. So we will also establish the project capital stack. So once we get through further architectural design, cost estimating, we'll put together what the debt and equity piece of this project will be in the public-private partnership. And then we will break ground this year, 2024, and predominantly because the hotel is a longer construction duration than single-story retail. 2024 will be full mobilization of all construction. The goal of this being, and part of why schedules don't always work out the way that you would like, is that there is a sweet spot for opening retail such that you create the most successful time for them to open, train, get ready for patio season. The last thing you want to do is open a restaurant with twice as many seats as it normally has while they're training people. So we look at in early 2025 as a great time to open. It's when we believe the hotel could be completed with a 14-month delivery schedule. And then we will phase, so the hotel and the site work and infrastructure would begin first. And then we would come in with single-story retail, obviously leaving ample time for our tenants to do their interior build-outs, train, prep, open, to hit 2025 ramped up and ready to go.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. Are you at all concerned about if we might be heading into a recession, and how would a recession affect this project?
That's a great question. Retail leasing and development is always a reactive process, but we try to stay ahead of those trends. We actually believe that right now is the best time to be in the position that we're in. Now is the time to be designing. Now is the time to be, watching the market. We think that, is the market going to reset itself in the next 4 months? Absolutely not. Is the market going to reset itself within a year? Yes. Our hope is that we as developers, what we do is we allocate a certain amount of money to each project. And unlike many developers, we spend it all. And that is to get enhanced materials, enhanced landscaping, enhanced lighting, enhanced signage, all those things that create sort of romance in a project. And getting out of a market where everything is exponentially more expensive than it should be affords us the right to go even further. So we're actually excited about where we're at. Obviously, everything is a little bit of a gamble, but we think that this schedule puts us in a time frame to build the project we want to build, design it on the right time frame, close it, permit it fully, break ground, and open in a time frame where even if there was a setback in the market, that we would build our way out of it and open at the right time.
Part two, please. And what type of experience would your company have with doing this kind of a project, navigating the challenge that we could be looking at?
That's a great question, and I guess I would refer back to a little bit of our experience with Pinecrest, where we weathered the COVID storm in an environment where many retail tenants didn't have to pay rent. We still had to pay our mortgage, and what we found is that the retail environment, when weathered appropriately, that some of these setbacks to their business creates a ton of value for projects like this. That fun things want to be next to other fun things. And that cross-pollination that used to be looked at as competition is now looked at as character building. And so everyone is just a little bit more comfortable with, hey, someone's going to buy a hamburger from me and then they're going to go get a beer across the street. That's fine because I sold a hamburger. I think what we learned from Pinecrest was that, we weathered the Pinecrest storm, and then we saw the right kind of tenants and those tenants that are going to succeed post-COVID. We also know how to design differently to, if another pandemic occurs, we understand what the successful retailers did to be able to avoid closing their doors. And all of that is great experience, as difficult of experience as it was,
Right.
Is still, we learn from our mistakes more than our successes. And so I think that's one of the things, but it really is forecasting as well, and it's the right balance of tenant mix.
Yep.
It's the right balance of knowing, what is the construction cost going to be? What contingencies are we going to hold to make sure that, if there's an increase in costs, we're covered. We still deliver the same project that we promised, that we approved, that we permitted, that we broke ground on, that we don't have to come back to this council and talk about value engineering. We believe that that's what we've done, and we feel good about it.
And I understand the value engineering with my previous job. I know what they always tried to use that terminology. We just know about the cuts.
Now it's value analysis,
Yeah.
more friendly ways to say it.
I appreciate your straightforwardness. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Mr.
Anybody
Chairman,
else?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank you for coming and giving this presentation for our council and our community. I do have a question on timing. As you build out and you speak with national tenants, local tenants, what type of time frame should we expect on announcements and maybe a sign out there saying this is what we expect and the build out, and give me a little bit of time frame on some announcements.
My guess is, and obviously I'd have to speak with Joel and Paul, but pending a positive receipt of this presentation today, we'd like to get a sign out there as soon as possible. We'd like to get a leasing plan out there as soon as possible. In terms of announcements of tenants, no one wants to announce tenants more than we do. Basically what we do, even if 5 tenants came in all at once, we would announce one on a rolling clock. Yep. But that first tenant is the most important. We don't like to hide it. We like to get out there, but there is a process to leasing in terms of the dance of attraction. It begins with sort of just conversations. The second step is an LOI that just sort of defines the lease terms. It tells us that they're interested. Then we move to lease. At the point we get a signed lease, we will announce.
Have you engaged any tenants like the hotel? Have you engaged with people that, hey, we're interested? Because I know that there's attraction pieces there that will lead to the next potential lease. So you've already engaged with some potential
Yes,
tenants.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We've engaged with potential retail tenants. We've engaged with potential hotel tenants. Those conversations are going well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walzak. Mr. Zales, do you have something?
No, Mr. Wallensack, pretty much that's my.
Denny.
All right. Nothing here? Anybody further questions? Anybody from the administration? Mayor?
Well, I would like to make a couple comments, and I know that anytime we publicly get involved with a project like this, and this particular thing, we've never done anything like this before, but we were faced with a situation where all the development in what was considered our town center was just State Route 2. And retail businesses were establishing just wherever there was ground available. And when the Kmart site came up for sale, we were a little ahead of that curve. We were talking to them before it came up for sale, but if we were going to have an actual town center that could exist other than retail development along a state route, that was the only access point we had. So we had to act on a purchase regardless to whether it was time to do it or not, because if we lost that opportunity and someone else would purchase it and build a whatever there or just rehab the building that was there, we lose the opportunity to go south and create something forever. So we took the risk to purchase that, and with the hope for the future, with opportunity. When we start looking at developers, which we looked at many, one of the demands that we had, and Randy Rutenberg was the first person we spoke to, and one of the things about going to Pinecrest, when we went to Pinecrest, Councilman Wallensack went, Mike Beasley, myself, Summer Vrieslar, and Amy Hansen from the schools. I can remember, I think that was it. Yeah. So scared me at first, because Pinecrest is pretty impressive. I said, oh my God, this is certainly not something we could sustain in Oregon. So sustainability was the first and foremost thing that I stressed with Randy. I go, this did scare me, knowing that if we built something like this here, wow, these people would have a hard time surviving. It's pretty, I don't know if you've ever been to Pinecrest, pretty impressive place, pretty big, way outscaled our city of Oregon. And he was quick to say, no, we understand the sustainability thing. And I said, so sometimes we have to give up a big flair for sustainability and practicality. And we talked to many developers, and we felt that Fairmont Properties was the one that really grasped that idea, that we knew retail in the city of Oregon was a difficult sell. It's not something that we have enough numbers to pull off big ventures. So with all the people we spoke to, they seemed to, as Bryce has said, you would change with the flow of the project. And others weren't so quick to say that. In fact, they didn't say it at all. So that's how we come to believe Fairmont Properties was the right people for us. We said we would have patience. We'd like to build it tomorrow, but we'd rather have something we would be proud of and something that we could sustain or the businesses could sustain than to put something in only to see people not be successful and have to refill. And we believe that was the message they sent to us. And that's why we're here. And we're still patient. We still like to see something there tomorrow.
Yeah.
But like I said, we'd rather see success and something that we could all be proud of, regardless of how long it took or takes. We just have to develop that patience.
Well, as somebody who has built north of $28 billion worth of mixed use, I can say thank you for getting a flat, square site under one single control. It has never happened to me in my entire life. And you did that exactly right, because even if somebody purchased off a little node of it, you'll lose it, you know,
Yeah.
because that inefficiency of having to work around a small missing fragment is the difference between a town center and not a town center. And so, you know, kudos to you all for doing that, and having the foresight to do that. I also think, you know, and it's something that resonated from my last conversation with Joel, is that, you know, we're making generational decisions with all of these. You know, we don't want to move so fast that we miss the opportunity to do something great because we're moving too fast and we miss it. And that, you know, yes, I think we're in a fantastic reboot phase, and now we're in a phase of accountability, and we're in a phase of progress. I think there's, you know, a renewed, you know, momentum in this project, and that, you know, we're super excited about it, to be honest. Like, this is something, you know, it's so unique to something that we don't have in our portfolio. We think that we have learned a lot from other projects, that it's time we can tackle something like this, and do it successfully. But, you know, it really is. The site is great.
Very good. Thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Mayor Safarian. I do have one question for myself, and I'll open it back up in case anybody else has it. We've got just a couple of minutes left here. So give me an idea, Bryce, you know, from the Fairmont perspective, obviously as a city's perspective, I think I can answer this, but from your perspective, what does success look like in, say, 90 or 120 days?
I think 120 days success looks like, you know, the first 4 items are either checked off or well on their way to being checked off. I think that this is a time period where there is good momentum. I think we need to get out to the market, and we need to start chasing down the right tenants. And once we have those first secure tenants, that is sort of the jet fuel for the project, is that we test it, we see that it will happen, that it is right, that the rent rates will support what we want to build here. And then we move hyper fast. At the same time, you know, we won't stop in terms of the design. Like we said, we're a full service firm. We do a lot of the design work in-house. We do measure our exposure. So we may not, you know, secure an architecture firm tomorrow. But I do most of our architecture in-house. I do all of our cost estimating in-house. And so we will be making progress. One of the things that we find is that when we do so much, and Jeff and I, our offices are right next to each other, we test the finance along with the design, the construction, and the schedule constantly, because those 4 things don't always marry up. And if Jeff is telling me I'm way off bounds, then I got to course correct, and vice versa. But I think, you know, the next 120 days, we see great movement on the first 4. We're going to need a little bit more in terms of the leasing threshold to really establish a true project capital stack, because we need to go in front of people with something. That's going to be greater design documentation, site infrastructure. The thing, you know, the city has done a tremendous amount of due diligence, but dirt scares us because it's the one thing we can't see underneath. And so we may do some additional due diligence during that time period. We also want to start to think about how we might, how the infrastructure layout might work. This new master plan is going to make the cost associated to that and the efficiency associated to that design much better than previous plans, which were a little bit more disjointed, and we're going to require a lot of branches. This is very similar to what we've done in Pinecrest. We're going to run a spine straight down the middle, and we're going to branch off. So it's going to cut down on our construction delivery time. It's going to cut down on the costs associated to the infrastructure and allow us to push that money to places where people see. And then the construction groundbreaking, obviously by the end of the year, that'll have, you know, significant design documentation, significant civil engineering documentation. What I think we'll probably look at to be able to get going in 2023 is a 2-phase permit submission. I think we'll submit for a site and infrastructure permit, mass grade, and we'll get mobilized on that while the balance of the buildings are wrapping up and filling in for a full shell and core permit. And we'll follow that, within that, 90 to 120 day period into 2024.
Okay, very good. So assuming that, so if basically the next 120-day period, so 4 months takes us into June, is there a willingness on your part, and I'm hoping the answer is yes, is there a willingness on your part, say, at that 120-day mark to come back to give us an update on what we've seen, what we do? Understanding there's some things that cannot be discussed in an
Right.
open forum. We certainly get that. Leasing negotiations and discussions, we get that. But at least a progress report so we can say, did we check off those top 4 items? Are we moved on to item 5 and 6? Are we still on target with what we have? What I would like to do is have this committee meet on a more regular basis, I would say at least throughout the next 24 months as we kind of navigate through this process. But I think now that we have a site plan in place that we're working from to develop and kind of pivot off of as needed, I think really making sure that the accountability, the execution of what we're doing becomes very important, not only to this body and our administration, but also to our community watching something move forward.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the part. So if there's a willingness to do that, I would ask that we will kind of reconvene this committee somewhere in that 120 days, give or take. We'll do so well in advance. And then maybe make that a quarterly, each quarter, each 90 days, whatever that may look like, where we're getting updates and having that dialogue. I think it not only builds some confidence and some support from this side of the table, but also from that side of the table for our community, seeing and hearing. There's been a lot of, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? As the mayor said, getting it right was more important than getting it fast. We can have things in the ground already. They're not the things that I think our community would love that we could put in there. I think this gives us the opportunity to do that. But I think we are at a point where we want to be smart, we want to be methodical, but we also want to see some dust flying eventually on this. We want
Absolutely.
to start seeing some activity with that.
Yep.
So with that said, any other council members with question? Mr. Wallensack, I see your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, you and the mayor mentioned community in your talk with Bryce, maybe your questions. Well, I also want to talk about community in regards to the individuals that were able to go to Pinecrest and meet with Randy and Fairmont Properties on the initial visit. We spoke about the events, your planning. Can you describe to the community kind of what type of events that person does? Because we do want this to be a community gathering place. And I think that's a key component of this.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we do great is we don't leave a project when it opens. At Pinecrest, we set the Guinness Book of World Records for most dogs in a photo at once. So we will look at a lot of different things. It's funny, there were 700 and some dogs, and it attracted a couple thousand people. And there were celebrity dogs, which I didn't know existed, but do. But it's farmers markets. It's events like that are so unique. People are like, what? But it's also like, we're going to have to get into what does the community want? What do our tenants want? What is non-competitive to our tenants, but still enhances their visibility and their productivity? But I apologize. I'm the bricks and sticks guy, so the programming is a little bit outside of my purview. But I can certainly send over a list of like 300 events we've done.
Yeah, and
Halloween.
that's where a Christmas tree is.
Yeah,
That's where
absolutely.
sleigh ride, Santa. So there's things that bring the community. It's just not a place to go have food and beverage or buy something. It's also a community gathering.
Absolutely. Movie nights. We had movie nights on the green. Always a great Christmas tree. But yeah, it's the big ones mixed in with the small ones so that there's sustained throughout the year. That there's some big moments, but there's also some peppered in, trying to get them around lull times.
Yeah, and just as little as I think when we were there, the young lady that was in charge of programming there talked about coloring contests. I believe she was talking about Easter and just a coloring contest where kids could come color. And so just little things like that, I think that would enhance the community and draw people in.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Okay, we were getting a little bit pushed on time. Is there anybody else that has any other questions, comments? I'll ask from the committee members first. Mr. Zell, Mr. Davish.
Nothing further.
Okay. Any other council members, administration, mayor, anything else to add? All good? Well, with that said, we appreciate you very much coming in. Like I said, we're excited about the opportunity that's before us. Like I said, the road behind us seems to be longer than the road before us now, and certainly we're excited about that. We'll reach out sometime, say, 120 days, give or take. We'd like to revisit and just kind of do a catch up and see where we're at and how things are going. It'll be nice to, I'll say, have something to go to market with. And I think the opportunity over the next 120 days is great for us and as a community. So we look forward to the partnership. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. With that said, from either one of my partner committee members, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Davish, second by Mr. Zale at 7:00. I got a glare. We'll call it 7:03. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to give everybody 10. Good job. 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
I need to use the bathroom anyway.
It's on and off. It's crazy.
Look at it. Now,
Now you turn yours on.
ours two
Now,
only work if they're both.
If
on.
I turn mine off, turn. So ours work in unison.
I always turn mine off, so that's why. So you can mute him when you.
I can't mute that.
We'll get you those capabilities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Gentlemen, thank you once again. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Denny, you want yours on or off? I don't want it to, I don't want to be on a light night.
Skipping down the hall.
The what? Good evening. Welcome to the Oregon City Council special meeting, February the 6th. It is now 7:12, and we will have a special meeting for a couple of things we need to do, and then we move right into the committee of the whole for this state, which is what we normally do today. I will open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, will you take a roll call of council present?
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Powell? Here. Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallenzek?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. Also present is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joe Major, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Law Director Melissa Papura, Civil Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and Assistant Finance Director Nick Roman. First order for night, council, is I need a motion to add items 11 and 12, 2003 to this agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 11 and item 12, 2023 will be added to tonight's special meeting. For the first item, item 11, this will be presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and City Administrator Joel Major, and I will defer to Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. So City Council discussed rezoning these properties for the next two items. In a previous meeting, it was voted down as the desire was to turn all of the properties into advanced manufacturing when there was at the time, a blend of commercial, industrial, and advanced manufacturing. So this item, number 11, is specifically for the one parcel located at 4315 Corduroy Road. This is owned by the Economic Development Foundation, and the proposal is to rezone this parcel to advanced manufacturing. The request today is a resolution to advance this to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Major. As a matter of fact, item 12 is so closest. Do you want to go ahead and explain that one too right now?
Yes, Mr. President. So item number 12 specifically addresses the three parcels to the east, one of which is owned by the Economic Development Foundation. Two of them are privately owned and are aware of what we are doing. One of them is in favor, and one of them, the other is, for lack of a better word, has been in favor, but is understanding. We are in discussions with them. We've had discussions with some of the other adjacent property owners as well. In addition to this, we have a list of mailings that will be going out to kind of broaden the area in which there's a certain amount of space or distance that we have to cover for the property owners in the general vicinity. We've expanded that to cover more ground. That was one of the concerns that some of the residents had. So we're going to cover more ground, have more mailings out and notices out to more people so that everybody's aware of the intentions. And again, all of these, 3 of these parcels are proposed to be advanced manufacturing, and this resolution would advance this proposal to the Planning Commission for review.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Council, do you have any questions for the administration regarding item 11 or 12?
Mr. President.
Mr. Reeves?
Thank you. Mr. Major, so the properties that we had discussed previously are all going to be sent back to the Plan Commission for advanced manufacturing. That is correct.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 11, 2023 as resolution 11, 2023, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Referring to the Plan Commission, the change in zoning of certain property located at 4315 Corduroy Road, setting a public hearing and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of Resolution 11 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Resolution 11, 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item, item 12, I will assign as resolution 12, 23, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Referring to the Plan Commission, the change in zoning of certain properties located on Wynn Road and Corduroy Road, setting a public hearing and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of Resolution 12 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Resolution 12 of 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves?
may I please ask the mayor a question, please?
You certainly.
Mr. Mayor, now that this is being sent back to the Plan Commission, what is the process? I mean, I know it goes through the Plan Commission, but how long before we could possibly see this back?
Well, and you used the term sent back, but because it's a new, it's in essence, a new it's a new application, so it's actually being sent to the Planning Commission. And then once the Planning Commission rules on it, it will come back to City Council. It has to come back to City Council within 30 to 45 days. So what our window is, the first opportunity of a Monday council meeting that falls over 30 days and between 45 will be the next time you see it. So somewhere between 30 and 45 days after.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That completes the agenda for these special meeting agenda outside of, we have.
I would like to say one other thing, Tim, that I forgot. And Mr. Reeves and rest council, what we did do is our requirement to notify people in the area is within so many feet. But we looked at the whole box, and anybody who looked like they fell in there, we sent notifications to all of them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. And we will move to a couple of appointments that we need to make this evening, and I will defer to the mayor for the first appointment.
Thank you, Mr. President and council. You know, with some retirements, we had a position of heavy equipment operator open. And after interviews, there's a recommendation from our folks, and they came back with Mr. Timothy Stevens. So I'm going to ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Mr. Tim Stevens of 220 East Dean Road, Temperance, Michigan, to the position of heavy equipment operator in the Streets Department to be placed at step 1 of the SV pay range, which is an hourly rate of $29.44, which is an annual salary of $61,235.20, with the startup date of February 7th, 2023. Once again, ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Mr. Tim Stevens to that position of heavy equipment operator, February 7th, council startup date.
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
I concur with the mayor on the appointment of Mr. Timothy Stevens, 220 East Dean Road, Temperance, Michigan, at a starting date of Tuesday, February 7th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Drake.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paulo. Thank you, Ms. Paulo. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mr. Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Mr. Timothy Stevens.
Mr. Stevens is here. We usually require you to come up and speak for about 15, 20 minutes.
No.
Or if you want to stand up so they can see who you are. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Our next appointment is our current clerk of council is planning on retiring and leaving us here. So we had to find a replacement for her. Civil Service Commission approved 15 applicant packages for clerk of council position on January 26th. 4 candidates were interviewed by Councilman Terry Reeves, Councilman Dennis Wallenczak, Law Director Melissa Pura, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, and myself. In addition to a writing exercise test that was administered by Sandy Garrett to all candidates, after the entire process, the interview committee discussed and evaluated all candidates in order to make a selection. I am pleased to recommend the appointment of Mrs. Cassandra Rawson of 4049 Glendale Avenue, Toledo, Ohio, to the position of clerk of council. She will be placed in a PSTE pay range 19 step 1 with an hourly rate of $31.8428 per hour and an annual rate of $66,232.92. I request this appointment be made at this meeting, and her effective starting date will be Tuesday, tomorrow, February the 7th. Ms. Rawson will also be posted 80 hours of vacation upon starting and accrue vacation at 80 hours per year. Ms. Rawson, congratulations.
Mr. President,
Well, hang on.
I think we gotta make you official yet.
Yeah. Council,
Mr. President,
is that Mr. Reeves?
yes, I concur with you on the appointment of Cassandra Rawson as our clerk of council position.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Are there any objections? Congratulations. Stand up so people can see who you are. And that does end all of our agenda for the special meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn the special meeting?
So move, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second, Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any objections? This special meeting of council is now adjourned. Now we will immediately fall into our normal committee of the whole, and we will get right to the agenda. We have 3 items. Council, can I get a motion to add items 13 through 15, 2023 to this meeting's agenda?
We don't need.
We don't need that.
No, we don't need it.
Oh, committee of the whole, right. Never mind. First item 13 is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Law Director Melissa Pura, and I will defer to Ms. Pura.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is to allow Walter Drain do their annual updates to our code to make sure that we're complying with any state of Ohio changes pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code or any changes that council would have made for the Oregon Municipal Code. So this is an annual replacement. I did go through it. It appears to have all the changes that have been made within the last year. And this is for the amount for them to make the changes. It's $4,730.94. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Council. Hearing none. Can I get a motion to assign item 13, 2023 to next week's agenda?
Mr. Zale, or President Zale?
Mr. Wallenbeck.
President Zale, I make a motion to move item number 13 of 2023 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenbeck.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Are there any objections, council? Hearing no objections, item 13, 2023 will be moved to next week's meeting agenda. The next item, item 14, is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien. I'll defer to Assistant Chief Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. President. What this does is give the fire department opportunity to send our full-time employees and our part-time employees per the collective bargaining agreement to Superior Uniform, to be fitted for their daily duty uniforms as well as their Class A uniforms and anything that they may need. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Chief. Any kind of percentage increase? They've been increasing their stuff, haven't they? Did we get a large increase in their?
I think
normal
everybody
costs?
has increased all their stuff, so that and the timeline has taken quite a long time to get uniforms, as I'm sure the police department can attest to as well.
I know, yeah, I know. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President.
Ms. Pauloff.
Chief Mullins, how long have you guys used these people? You've used them in the past?
As long as I've been here, 28 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, can I get a motion to move item 14, 2023 to next week's agenda?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 14, 2023 will be placed on next week's meeting agenda. Next item is item 15, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman, and I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to proceed with the Munding Drive and Dearborn Avenue reconstruction project. Both are service roads along 280, as you know, but out of 5 bids, DL Smith was the lowest and best bid. DL Smith is ODOT pre-qualified, and we have checked the reference. We believe they'll do a good job. This project has 2 grants, $400,000 from the Federal Highway Administration, and another $300,000 from Ohio Public Works Commission. So, and that's all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions? Hearing none. I'll look for a motion to send item 15, 2023 to next week's meeting agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Davitt.
I move item 15 of 2023 to next week's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Davitt.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 15, 2023 will be placed on next week's meeting agenda. Council, this does ramp up all of our items for this committee of the whole, and we will now move to the mayor's
Not much to report, other than I was here for the bid opening. It was, I thought it was pretty, Mr. Roma said we got grants that will pay for about half of this job. It turns out it paid for 2/3 of the job because we had a really good bid. So when we were expecting to pay about $700,000, and now we're going to pay about $400,000 out instead in our share. It was a pretty good day. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Major?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pepora?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenbeck?
Thank you, Mr. President. No report from my committee, but I'd like to thank the Economic Development Committee for hosting the meeting for Town Center. I think it was very appropriate to regather and let the community know that the project is moving in the proper direction. So thank you to that committee.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Davish.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to call a Water and Sewer Committee meeting on Monday, February 13th at 6 PM in the council conference room. And the purpose of the meeting is for wire tap fees for the new construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
6, yeah.
6 o'clock the 13th. Ms. Paula.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 weekends ago, I went on my ride along. I go with the police twice a year. And I went around with Amy, who's an officer, 3 to 11 shift. And I gotta say, those poor guys don't get lunch. If I had a wish list for them, it would be, they gotta have lunch. They filled their whole day. They had, and it wasn't a busy day, but their whole day was filled. And what I was impressed with was the officer I was with hit every neighborhood in the city of Oregon. And she patrolled everything, and she's really got a thumb on all the residents. She knows them. She knows who lives where. I mean, it was really refreshing to know how connected they are to the city. So it was a great opportunity to see how on top of things they are. So good job to the chiefs for the job well done, and I really thank them all for their service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
That's
Paula.
it.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Mr. Horniak.
I guess as a reminder, in case you forgot, we had an Economic Development Committee meeting tonight. I want to thank everybody for being here, being part of that, and listening to the updates. Really want to thank Fairmont for coming in, spending a little time talking about that. I think it's fair to say after a couple of years of working through a lot of discussions, a lot of thoughts, I think we finally have something in front of us that gives us the good, solid starting point to move forward. I think we're past, the oddities of the last couple of years. It'll be nice to see what happens. It was fun in the conversations with Bryce in a couple of different times. Continuing to, that's $50 in a meeting. I'm phone going out, that's $50 to the kitty. Just hearing them talk about accountability and execution. We're at the point now where I think we know what we want to do, how we want to do it. For the members of the community, just to share, we hear the comments, we hear the suggestions, we hear the ideas. It's not ours to say, we're going to put this there, we're going to put this here, unless any one of us wants to write the check for investing into that property. What we do try to do is create an environment and a pathway to help those folks be attracted to our area. And I think what we have here and what we're starting with on this particular design, I think creates a lot of opportunity with that. So I do thank Fairmont. I thank everybody for their questions, their participation today, and I'm really excited to see what we have moving forward. And with that, I have nothing further. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. I don't have anything for my standing committee, but it was the right time to have this meeting tonight that we had. It was the right time. Thank you for having it, Mr. Major. Thanks for putting that together too. It was the right time. I think we all need to have a really good idea about what was really going on with the project. We all had different ideas, but they kind of put us on a really good track right now. I think we all have a really good understanding of what we're doing. The only thing I want to mention, and maybe I shouldn't, but I will anyways, but the idea of golf carts and that kind of nature is rising up again, and we may have to consider a future meeting to discuss this, how we want to approach this once and for all. I know that I did, I'm not the only one, but I did quite a bit of work last week for a couple days on this. And I actually was a lot more educated on this than I was before, with the licensing and the titling and the plating and all that, and what is legal and what's not. So I think that's something the committee head might want to consider doing fairly soon. With that, we have two people signed in to speak, but I think one person has left. Glenn Ryan, are you?
Oh, no, that,
You were,
for
okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay, thank you very much. So we have no one signed up to speak tonight. I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? Meeting is adjourned. No, I'm kidding. No, Julie Mittendorf did the same thing. She
Oh, God, well, talking to me.
did the same thing.